If you were randomly hit by a truck, where would you want to go? For most people, it's probably the hospital. For others, maybe they'd want to be reborn in a fantasy world where they have special powers, a main quest, and a love interest. But for me, I'd want to be reborn in the Wild West, so I could do something like this. Being a cowboy in space is the next best thing though, and Boothill is a perfect example of both that and how you have to speak nowadays not to get your videos demonetized. Today, I'm going to be teaching you how to build and play Boothill. My name is Braxophone, and let's talk about our second favorite tech cowboy. By the way, the reason he's not the first favorite is because some of us have been committing acts of self-hatred since 2016. Boothill plays further into the break gimmick, focusing on breaking a ton and dishing out extra break and super break damage. But not only that, Boothill also added to the cool hat meta. When you get into combat, you want to use Boothill's skill, because like our favorite emo king, he gets an enhanced basic attack. His skill puts him in the gulag for a 1v1 against the enemy for 2 turns. During that, the enemy can only attack Boothill, and Boothill can only attack them, and both of them take increased damage. The other guy takes more though, because Boothill's American. When he's in the duel state, his basic attacks dish out a ridiculous amount of physical break. And if the enemy is in a weakness broken state, Boothill does break damage in addition to his normal damage output. If you break their weakness with that first shot, his following attacks can trigger that extra break damage. The amount of toughness he breaks and break damage he deals are based off of the amount of pocket trick shot stacks he has, which is Boothill's talent. Anytime Boothill is in a duel and the enemy is weakness broken or defeated by anyone not restricted to Boothill, he gains a pocket trick shot, and if he breaks and defeats them at the same time, he gets 2. Because of that, sometimes it's best to just Aaron Burr a smaller enemy to grab 2 stacks quickly. The pocket trick shot persists throughout the fight, so after his first 3 standoffs, he becomes a destructive machine, which actually makes sense because he's a robot. So you might be thinking, wow, gee whiz, Braxophone, that all sounds great, but what if the enemy isn't weak to physical damage? Not you. Luckily for Boothill, the devs wanted him to actually be useful. Boothill's ultimate deals physical damage to an enemy, breaks a ton, but most importantly, applies a physical weakness to them for 2 turns. His entire kit is meant to make him fully functional as one character, and even without Super Break and Ruan Mei, he's a decent unit. But with those 2, he goes from being just American to the reason we won something in the Olympics. And on top of all that, he has 3 traces that enhance his gameplay. One that reduces the damage he takes from enemies outside his duel, one that gives him 10 energy for every pocket trick shot he would gain, and one that helps him locate the Critorus. For every bit of break effect he has, he gains 10% of it in crit rate and 50% in crit damage, up to a maximum of 30% to 150%. This basically just means that Boothill values break effect more than crit substats, and that you're finally gonna roll crit stats, now that you don't want them. Boothill is a completely unique character. Though his ass may be flatter than a wanted poster, he adds enough new gameplay to Star Rail for the International Cake Exploration Society to forgive him. Look, if they're saying he has cake, we kinda have to believe him. Lastly, his technique makes it so that the first enemy he enters a standoff with gets a physical weakness for 2 turns, so you basically always want it on. For Boothill's talent priority, you want to level his talent, skill, and ultimate, and then basic, since his damage is mostly based on break. The way Boothill stands is hilarious and awesome. The dude's basically a whole JoJo character. Boothill's build consists of anything with break effect. Right now, mine uses 2-piece Watchmaker, 2-piece Thief of Shooting Meteor, and an Intel i9-14900K 14th gen processor. In a completely perfect world, his best in slot is 4-piece Thief of Shooting Meteor, but 99.9% of the time, running a mix of 2-piece break effect sets can give you better substats to pick from, which ends up being more overall damage. The only difference between 4-piece Thief and 2-piece Watchmaker 2-piece Thief is the 3 energy per break, which honestly doesn't even matter most of the time just because of how easy it is to get his ults up. So usually running 2-2 is better. You can also give him 2 pieces of the speed set, but I wouldn't stray from that or the break effect sets. For his planar sets, you want to go with Talia, which gives a ton more break effect in exchange for him being faster than Keemstar. Until a different planar set comes out that gives speed bonus or break effect, this is basically the only one you want. Now, I will say we haven't had a ton of relics that are focused on break effect yet for DPS DPS characters, so I would say odds are pretty good that we're gonna get a Break Effect Relic or Planar set in the future. So feel free to just use scraps for Boothill for now. If you plan on maining him, maybe hold off on farming just in case we get a DPS break set. Now, for his main stats, you want to have speed boots and a Break Effect robe. There's nothing else, that's it. You literally can give this guy any main stats for his chest and sphere, because none of those stats make a difference on him. You can even give him double HP, which would probably please the International Cake Exploration Society. Technically, yes, going crit rate or crit damage chest and physical damage orb is optimal, but that's only if they also have the most break effect and speed substats. Speaking of which, your best substats are break effect because it means free crit stats and more overall damage from his kit and super break, and speed to make sure he can do lots of damage lots of times. Here's the build summary, except I give it a little hat this time. Anything. Yeah, like, I guess if you want, you can give him his signature, but outside of that, there's not really anything good. Bro only cares about speed and break effect. One break effect substat is like a chinchillion crit stats. You can give him something with crit, but it's not gonna make a huge difference. Here's a chart showing Boothill's damage with different light cones. So yeah, I don't know, give him your Locha light cone or something. So if you haven't noticed, my Boothill's level 1, that's because I'm filming this team section over on live. And speaking of live, I don't know if I have what it takes to keep on living. I went to 85 polls on Boothill before I got this gas fish thing again. And that, Mark T6, that makes 4 banners in a row where I lost 50-50 at 85 polls. Anyways, Boothill works with normal hypercarry characters, and he also works with break characters. But the main thing to keep in mind is that even though Boothill's break damage is insane, his personal damage contribution outside of break isn't super crazy. So because of that, his best team is going to feature Harmony MC, Ruanmei, and Aventurine, just because Harmony MC is going to basically allow him to get super break, and Ruanmei is going to help him increase that super break damage. Also, on top of that, his toughness break that he gets from his talent, that increases the amount of toughness he breaks based on pocket trick shot. The amount of toughness he breaks actually comes out before Ruanmei gives the break efficiency. So if he ends up doing double the break, she adds 50% to double the break. So ultimately, Ruanmei's buff ends up being just a lot stronger with Boothill than a lot of other characters. If you have Ruanmei and Boothill, the other 2 characters can be 4 stars or, you know, even the honorary 5-star over here. To be fair though, Harmony MC kind of is definitely a 5-star. Anyways, you can also do some other cool stuff with Boothill though. You can actually use him as a hyper carry with the action forward characters. Now, you don't actually care about a lot of the stat bonuses that Bronya gives. You literally just care about the action forward. And the same thing applies to Sparkle. You can also use Sparkle instead just to bring him forward and give him more attack. Because remember, he's trying to break the enemy and get pocket trick shots as fast as possible. And as soon as the enemy is broken, the next turn they're basically just dead. I just threw Ho-Ho in here because, I don't know, I usually throw Locha in. But you can run any sustainer as I mentioned before. And Gallagher's a really good one to run, especially with Harmony MC. Now you'll notice that even with action forward characters, you're still playing Harmony MC. It's because Super Break is just so good. And because Boothill's already scaling on break effect, the super break damage just ends up being a massive bonus. Speaking of action forward, you can also play Robin in this and it's totally fine. I personally would save Robin for like a double DPS team, but you can also play her on this side as well. And yeah, it may seem like he's pretty limited with his teams just because I have the 2 examples and both of them include Harmony MC. But technically speaking, if you didn't want to play Harmony MC, you could just play another character. Honestly, you could maybe even play an action forward character. So now you have Sparkle who can bring him forward. You have Robin who can also bring him forward. I don't know. I'm just spitballing. I haven't actually calced this team at all. That I definitely wouldn't recommend it unless you try it out and it works for you. But yeah, just build them with break characters and action forward. Oh, and I'm praying for you guys who haven't rolled yet. Remember, every single time I get a Bailu and lose a 50-50, one of you guys does not get a Bailu and wins a 50-50. So I'm 99% sure none of you are swiping on Boothill for Eidolons, especially with Firefly and Jade coming up, but just in case, here's what you have to look forward to. His E1 gives him a stack of pocket trick shot to start the fight off with. It also gives him 16% defense ignore, which ends up being a pretty solid damage increase while also making his ramp up time much faster. Whoa, your Bronya's eating up a lot of skill points, is what I would say if you didn't have E2 Boothill, which is gonna give you a skill point back whenever you get a pocket trick shot stack in standoff. Whenever this effect triggers, you also get 30% break effect for for 2 turns. It doesn't give you 2 skill points when you trigger 2 pocket trick shots in one though, but it's a solid Eidolon for sure. E3 is an ultimate and basic attack level up, and E4 is a damage increase to the enemy in standoff and damage reduction for Boothill. E5 is gonna level up his talent and skill, and E6 makes Boothill quit the hunt forever. He'll then follow that up by joining my goats as a destruction character. He'll do damage to adjacent enemies whenever he deals break damage. Now, I'm honestly not quite sure if this applies to Super Break, but I'm sure it's broken either way. Between his Eidolons and his Light Cone, I'd recommend going with his Light Cone since it's such a huge gain for him with his speed and break stats, and there's not really any other options that stand out. And remember, for the low price of $1,000, Boothill can mimic a fraction of Sam's power. Subscribe.